Chloe to introduce herself and to take the stage. So welcome, Chloe.
Thank you ever so much. So it's been lovely. I've been messaging people. There's some really lovely familiar faces. So it's always great to see people return. Oh, I've just gone really big. Thanks, Kate. Right, I'm going to share a presentation with you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Chloe Walton. I do leadership coaching for female leaders in male-dominated environments. So I do a lot in sport, but I also do a lot across insurance and banking and finance as well. And the two areas I specialize in is the individuals, the women in those dominated environments, but also I'm starting to coach the system too, because you fantastic people on this call don't need fixing. The system needs fixing. So we're going to try and attack that as well, you know, one company at a time, one male allyship program at a time. But values for me are one of the fundamental things that I love working with individuals and organizations on. There's some logos there at the bottom. I've done this presentation I'm doing in an hour, so it's very much me talking at you, although I will engage you in hopefully the chat at times. Please also feel free to stick a question in chat. I'm more than happy with sort of interaction. But this 1 hour session actually morphs into a much bigger sort of program, if you like. So for organisations like UK Sport, I've done their event leadership program where we did 2 solid days on values and what they mean and how we work together. And I do it for corporations as well. And like I say, on an individual level as well. You can apply everything I'm going to say today to you as individuals and to corporates or teams. So feel free to question me on that as well. It's something that we're also being called out on more, which I really appreciate. I think one of the advantages of social media is if a company or organisation set out an intention of the way they want to be and then aren't, we're getting much better at calling that out. So it's important. It's something that we can lead our lives with, and that's where we'll end up from this session. So sort of 3 real areas: understanding what values are, maybe a term you've heard, maybe it's something that you know, maybe it's something that you're very familiar with, your own values. Maybe you've got no clue about them at all. But also I'm going to talk about how you help discover your own values and how to really understand what they are and embed them. And then this sort of values-led leadership. So in your life, how can you lead with values and why that's important? So that's what we're going to be going through throughout the session. So engage with me in chat. Take yourself off mute if you want to, but if you're sitting eating your lunch, you can just absorb it and not engage at all. So what is a value? So let's get you sort of type straight away. When you think about values, maybe when you first heard about this workshop, maybe you've heard about other people talk about values. What comes to mind? What is a value? So take to the chat, tell me what you think values are. Why might they be important? Do you know what your brilliant, perfect. Kate, thank you for starting us off. It's what you stand for, what you live by, what's important, very important, what we believe in, why I do what I do, principles to live by, absolutely. Core beliefs, deeply held beliefs, yep, absolutely. What you believe in and what you live your life by. All these are great. Fabric that runs through you and your organisation, a guiding compass, absolutely. Integrity, what we stand for, non-negotiable. Thank you, Emily, incredibly important. Yes, and your values attract others who share these values. We're going to talk about that today. So thank you, Rachel. So just to give you the sort of the definition, values are this. The first bit we're tend to be quite familiar with, this sort of principles or standards of behaviour. But the second bit is the most important bit, one's judgment of what's important in life. So what I deem to be important for my life will be very different from what you deem to be important in your life. So yes, it's what's important to us. It comes from our beliefs. They can have a really positive impact on our life, guiding principles. Also, some are stronger than others, and we'll have a look at this, and maybe unique and aspirational. So they're the words that I hear from people when I ask that question. But here's how it all fits together. Bear with me, I'm a great metaphor user, and you'll see lots of pictures, but it will make sense. So first of all, you have to, as an individual, sort of understand what your purpose is. Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And in this metaphor that we're going to use, imagine that you're a canoer, or for me, it would be more paddleboarding, but we'll go with the images. So imagine that you get out of bed in the morning, because actually having freedom of being on the water and maybe chartering new routes is why you get out of bed. It's what drives you. Once you understand what your purpose is, you then have to pick a vision. You have to try and aspirationally work out where you're headed. So which river are you going to start on? And that will be to do with how much you want to stretch yourself, how much you want to stay in your comfort zone. So maybe, it's the Amazon, maybe it's the Nile, maybe it's the Thames, maybe it's a local river that's much, much closer to home, and it's where you're going to start. But that vision is all about what is it that I want to achieve, and setting that sort of milestone, that goal, and agreeing what that is. The next bit that we're quite good at, all of us, is your mission. How am I going to do this? So if I've picked my river, how am I going to do it? And that tends to be actions orientated. And I'm sure if I asked a load of you, who's got a to-do list, you'd all say yes. Your to-do list tends to be that list of actions that you know that you need to do to achieve your vision because you want to live your purpose. This is the ideal, okay? What we're less good at is this bit, which is, how am I going to do this through how I behave and how I feel? So anybody who works in sort of an organization as part of a big team, we're very good. You'll have missions and visions and strategies, possibly less purpose and maybe some values, but they also just might be stuck up on a wall that you see a list of words, but no one actually lives them. So today we're going to explore values. So if I take you down to that particular core area about how we're going to get there and to do with your behaviors and feelings, this is what it might look and feel like. So aspirationally, we want this beautiful, calm river. We've picked the boat that's relevant for us. And that boat is really, really stable when you're living your values. Then the white water hits, metaphorically in life. Could be through work, could be through home life, could be through illness, could be anything, but the white water hits. Our boat can still be incredibly stable if we know what our values are and we continue to live them. When our values are grated against, or if someone around us has a very different set of values to us, and we're trying to reach to their boat, our boat becomes unstable. And this whole instability bit of our boat affects everything in life. We are not as good at compartmentalizing our work, home, romance, life as we think we are. It's all intertwined. So if I feel unsettled, unbalanced, or lost, 99% of the time, what you will be experiencing is a clash of your values, or a lack of value, or a lack of understanding what your values are. The other metaphor that this then continues into is when there is a fork in the river, unless you have your vision and mission mapped out, or at least a rough understanding, there's a fork in the river, your boat will spin, because there is no reason to go left or right. There's no particular pull if you don't know where you're headed. So if you're feeling like, well, I could go left or I could go right, and it doesn't matter, you need to set out your vision and mission to enable you to give you that guiding force to get you down left or right. Decisions become more easy. So that's sort of the principle, that's the context for values. But how do they actually work for you as an individual? Some people put in there that deep held beliefs, and you might have seen this if you've been on any of my other sessions before. You might have seen this from the imposter syndrome session. All of your life experiences, the things that have happened, the things that have gone wrong, the way you've brought up, the culture that you've been brought up in, the surrounding environment, all are like layers of an iceberg, and your core beliefs and values sit at the real fundamental part of that. That's then topped off by our feelings and our emotions, because that's, things like that unstable boat is what generates the feelings. So that's then still under the surface, but it's based on your core values and core beliefs. And then you start to tell your story, your self stories and your internal narrative. What people witness above the line is your actions and your confidence in what you do. So the more you understand about the bit below the water and what is right for you and what makes you at your best, the more confident you become in your actions. It's incredibly difficult to sort of spot someone's values when they walk up to you, or if you're working in a team. It's only when you really get to know someone that you can really understand what their values are. But like I say, I encourage you to understand what's important for you in that iceberg to enable you to have the confidence and actions in what you do. If you look right down the bottom, that's where the imposter syndrome sits. When we start doubting or judging our own values, when we're not being able to live our values to the full, that's when the narrative creeps in about what's right or what's wrong. And so values look like this. There are many different models out there in terms of how you pick your values. So this is just one. And if you've got another one, please do share it. There are, like I said, there are many out there. A lot of people think you just have to have this big word. So let's just say adventure. I've got this adventure value. Okay, the word is just one small part of it. What I encourage all my clients to do is say, right, well, how do you describe it? Okay, how do you describe adventure? What does it mean to you and why is it important? And then the visual representation follows suit. So as you can see, I'm a great pictures person because pictures tell 1,000 words. So if I look at the word adventure, I could depict this in any way that is relevant for me. So adventure might be, I don't want to do everything that everyone else is doing, so I want to divert from the crowd. Adventure might be more that sort of courageous lion type, taking on something maybe ambitious, new, dangerous. Adventure might be being acknowledged for doing something like a reward, getting that sort of completion of the adventure, or adventure can simply be taking a leap of faith. Now, if you listen to that last sort of 60 seconds of my words, I've used hundreds of words in there, from acknowledgement to courage to deviation. All of those could be your value words. So don't get hung up on the one word, adventure. Get hung up on what it means to you, and ideally via picture. And the other thing is, you don't just have one. Everyone asks me, how many should you have? I always say somewhere between 5 and 8. You can have 3, you could have 10. It is utterly individual. I wouldn't have many more than 8 because I don't think you will remember them. And I think the whole point about values is they should be front of mind. Now, when you have a strong value, I've got that one in orange as one of my group. When you are living it and it's in its sweet spot and everyone around you shares it, you are high performing, you are balanced in your boat, and you are loving life. That's what that flow of life feels like when you're getting that balance value. What then happens if that value starts to be missing and is underplayed? You feel really demotivated. There's something not quite right. There's something missing, and that's what it will feel like. Equally, if you overplay the value, that's when the voice starts, well, you really should be doing such ... And so then it becomes an inner critic. So how your values work together is you use all of them in balance to make sure none of them are over or underplayed. And this is a constant sort of self-reflection of what have I got, what am I missing? And I'm going to give you a bit of a tool to work out how to do this. But let me give you, have I got it up? No, let me go back. Let me give you a good example, and we'll come on to some of these. Pre-lockdown, one of my values is loyalty. I'm a coach, so everybody who says, oh, can I have a quick word? I'm a big, yes, absolutely, more than happy to help. Until my diary was so full, I couldn't do anything because I was squeezing in 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And what actually was happening is my loyalty value was being overplayed. Now, what I was also doing is not having any very good conversations, because all of them I was thinking about what I was going to do next. But my inner critic was saying, you can't say no, you're a loyal person. You really have to keep saying yes to all these people. You'll be letting people down if you do. So I've got this whole internal narrative keeping me in this saying yes to everything. Now, one of my other values is about growth. And actually, I was not growing or enabling the people I was speaking to grow because I was so hung up on being loyal. So actually, by leaning a little bit more into my growth value, I get into the permission to let my loyalty dip slightly so that actually the balance is back. So I can quieten my inner critic, because growth is still a value, and I can get back into that sweet spot. So we have a tendency to overplay one of our probably most valuable or most important values. So this is what we need to watch out for. So that's the context, that's the balancing effect that you've got to have. Now, how you discover your values, and some of you, I already know because I can see some faces, know what your values are, but it's an evolution process. It keeps going, you keep looking at them. Do they change over time is normally a question I get. Not really. Their priority of importance might flip, but you tend to have the same set of values you've always had, partly because of your, like I say, upbringing, and partly because they're so deep rooted in your iceberg. But if you want to just have a little test of what your values might be, all of you think about someone who frustrates you or really annoys you, or something that frustrates you or really annoys you. And the first thing I notice on the screens is the smile, those wry smiles. Everybody's got that person that slightly, you know, is a bit antagonistic. What's actually happening here is they are displaying some sort of behavior which clashes against your values. So now think about that person, and instead of them in their entirety, or that thing that you're thinking about that frustrates you, think about what's the element of that person, of that thing that is the frustrating bit. Is it that they're disrespectful? Is it that they're not genuine? Is it that they don't have any integrity? Is it that they're really loud and brash and arrogant? Is it that they're... Think about that thing. And the flip version of that, so if they're really loud and arrogant, that means you've probably got some sort of humility value. If you've got someone who's really disrespectful, you've got a respect value. And that's how to play it. So these things that trigger you are because they grate against something that's really important to you. So that's the way to start thinking about it. If you want to, no pressure, if you want to share in the chat the thing that you think that behavior that someone demonstrates that winds you up, feel free to share, because one of the things about sharing amongst you amazing women is quite often you help each other. That thing that that person does might also be familiar to a load of other people on here. So if you can start labeling that respect, that whether it's, you know, humility, whether it's integrity, whether it's that sort of purpose and passion, you know, if someone's really like, well, couldn't really care about that, when you want them to care, that's because you're passion driven. So feel free to share with each other the sorts of things that come up for you. So this is how to do it. Now, this is from a book called The Squiggly Career, which you may or may not have heard about. And like I say, there are many other routes to doing this. If you think about that person that frustrates you, or that thing that frustrates you, that tends to be a low. So if you think about your life's journey over a period of time, and actually you can go back as far as you like, those moments that are the highs, that is when you are living your values. That's when everything is aligned and that's what's good. So in amongst that great story, there will be the reason that that was great, and that's where you're living your values. Equally, in your lows, something's missing, or something's being grated against, or something's, you know, a problem. I left the financial world probably now 7 years ago because I so fundamentally disagreed with my senior leader that every day became this really, really hard work challenge. And every day I thought I was going to change it, and every day I couldn't. And a lot of it was about integrity. My boss at the time had the least amount of integrity I've ever met in an individual. So that's why it was grating me. So it just becomes really hard. So those lows in your life are also, that's when it's hard. That's when something is being challenged. Think about the wonderful lockdown, being disconnected from people. So those individuals who like connection, love family, love travel, love adventure, all of that will have felt overly hard than those that loved, that have a value for peace and quiet and time and contentment and balance. So quite often when you speak to people about the same situation and someone's saying, actually, I quite like lockdown because, and someone else is saying, oh, it was the worst time of my life, their lens, their views, their perspectives about what's important was different. And that's why it feels different. For the exact same situation can feel different for different people. And I'm just going to go to the chat. So yeah, Nicola, thank you for sharing. You know, someone who wants everyone to conform to their view doesn't respect everybody, doesn't respect others, and that whole diversity of thought, that's empowering people, absolutely. Opposite to selfishness, great question, Flo. If someone is really selfish, that can come down to that humility, humble. It can also come to a giving, sharing value. You know, that sort of, it can be a quality. So you have to find your own word, and I'll throw hundreds of words out here. You'll land on one that feels like it resonates. That's all that you've got to get to. Lack of thought and impacting others. I would hazard a guess that an awful lot of people on this call care about that sort of purposeful impact, what they're leaving behind. It does broach into your purpose, but also, you know, everybody on this sort of network wants to do good. We want to leave the shirt behind in a better place. So that's one way of going about it. So Sue, I love yours. Yes, right-wing politicians. Politicians are probably the least values-led demonstration of organisation that I've ever come across, but I'm not going to get on that soapbox right now. So, first of all, start here. Who were you with? Where were you? What were you doing? What environment were you in? You know, there's a lot about, actually, I was outside and it was a lovely day and it was just freedom and space and energy. Other people are surrounded by people, so there's that stimulation of conversation. Think literally about that specific situation. And one of the great sort of tools that someone taught me is, think about it as if you were describing a film. You know, actually get into as much detail as you can, because it'll help you uncover, the more of these that you do, the themes. The other thing you can do is gather the stories in this way. And so I'm assuming we can share these slides afterwards. Yeah. So think about this last year, COVID, but what's been the greatest challenge for you? Anything that challenges us is threatening our values. Think about a recent experience in work or life that you've loved being part of. These sort of highs and lows don't have to be big life events. They can be little moments. You know, that meeting that you left where you got a real sense of that was good, or a conversation, or a project you've completed, or what are those little elements where you just went, yes, that was good. And then pinpoint a person that significantly influenced who you are. What is it that they did? How did they get the best out of you? What is it that they encouraged? Because again, that will be getting you to play into your values and your sweet spot. And so on a really simple basis, something I get all my clients to do is, over the next week, collect the ingredients of what makes a great day. What makes a great day? Now, you won't get all of your values in everything that you do. Your values appear in all parts of your life. So you might have one value that you totally get outside of work. You might have another value that you get inside of work. And again, if I ever talk to leaders about burnout, it tends to be this one value is taken over, an achievement, a work-orientated value, but at the detriment of something that gives you energy, like connection, family, friends, loyalty, people, something like that. So as long as you're in balance and you've got these ingredients throughout your day, week, then that's how you will be living your values. And again, I say day and week, and it popped into my mind, if you've got an adventure value as an example, and you love these big sort of holidays where real challenges come up, that actually might be enough once a year to still get that balance of values. So that's how you do it. So I'm just going to share with you, to give you an example, my values. This just happens to be the way that I have demonstrated them, but I can give you sort of the richer story that you need to get behind when you've got your own values. So if I take something like creativity, I'm actually not a creative person. You know, that whole instantly people go to, oh, can you draw? Or can you, it's like, no, I'm not that creative. But actually I'm stimulated by challenging the norm. So I don't want to do things like other people do. My absolute favorite person, film, book is Alice in Wonderland, because she's always questioning the status quo, and she definitely sees things from different perspectives, right? So from big to small. So for me, that little sentence, stimulation of challenging the norm, and Alice in Wonderland, to me brings up this whole, my need for challenging through a creative way. Now, other people might listen to that and think, well, actually, shouldn't your value be challenged? Shouldn't it be something else? Doesn't matter, they're mine. This is my words. This is what sort of resonates for me. Growth, taking on something that no one thinks is possible. I desperately try to surf all the time, unsuccessfully. I have 2 teenage boys who are very good at it. But I secretly love walking into the water with a surfboard, because I know that I'm that sort of stereotypical middle-aged woman that really shouldn't probably have one, but I love it. And I'm constantly trying to learn from it. And I notice, I think someone on the call is growth mindset coach. You know, that's what it's about, taking on something new, slightly knowing that I might fail at it, but if I don't do it, then I'm not going to grow. And I believe in all of that for my clients too. You need to stretch yourself and fail at some stuff to learn. Then respect for me is about this value everyone equally. So again, this could be equality. This could be about valuing people. I call it respect. We have no idea what's going on in everybody else's lives. And then the last one is this loyalty one. This is the one that gets me every time. So even if you can't see me, know that I'm there. That is my biggest overplayed value. That is that I can't let anyone down. I need to respond to all of this really quickly. That is my dangerous overplayed one. And I have to use respect actually for myself as well as others, or the creativity or the growth, to pull me back into or allow me to be slightly disloyal. And even saying disloyal freaks me out. That's not what I want to do. So be careful that the thing driving you isn't one overplayed value. I'm just going to pause for breath there. Has anyone got any questions? I'm appreciating that I'm speaking rather a lot. If you do have any questions, just jot them in the chat and I will pick them up. So write your list of stories, gather that ingredients of what makes a really good day. And once you've got all of those, really you need to start self-reflecting and testing them, for want of a better phrase. So list who you are at your best. And remember, this is when you are at your best. This is your authentic self. There's nothing quite like you when you're living this. Now, it's the words, pick the word that works for you, and it's that description. What does it actually mean to you? And then again, pick a period of time and start to notice when these values appear in your life and when they're challenged or missing. So a day that you're on a high, probably your values are all there, a majority of them are there. So think about, well, I really love that day because, oh yes, look, I had this, this and this. When you're feeling lost, low a bit, what's missing? What have you not got enough of? And how much control have you got to bring some more of that to your life? So if I'm overleaning into work and one of my values I get from my life, bring the balance back. You'll get more energy and you'll perform better for yourself when you're in balance. And be prepared to notice that one, which is the one that you're not prepared to live without. That's the first clue that that's going to be the one in your driving inner critic. The thing that's going to keep you, it's meant to be keeping you safe, but actually is probably not doing you a favor. The more you keep reflecting on these, the more concrete they will become. And you can actually have fun with these. So think about in your downtime, imagine either books or films or TV programs that you like. Do you have sort of a go-to? Are you a criminal person? Are you a rom-com person? Are you a factual person? Interestingly, that's all feeding your values. So those people that love puzzles, games, solving stuff, there will be a sort of solutions orientated, need some sort of achievement challenge. It's embedded in what we watch, what we do, who we speak to, who's in our friendship groups. Why is that conversation with that person better than a conversation with another person? Because you share values. So literally they're everywhere. The more that you can have this little post-it note or whatever it is that look at your values, you can start going, yeah, that's it, that works, that's important for me. So when this gets into you leading your life, this is when it becomes important for anybody out there on this call who is either looking for a job, in a job they don't like, in a relationship that they're not satisfied with, is because their values are being grated against. We are brilliant. If we'd been in the room today, I guarantee you we would have all swapped facts and informations and rituals, whether how much of the chat was, oh, it's rainy London, where have you come from, what job do you do, where do you work, all very safe. This relationship sort of pyramid, to get to rapport, you have to at some point give our opinions, values, beliefs and attitude. And that is quite risky. And I actually did this with an organisation. It was a couple of weeks ago where dear Will Smith had just slapped Chris Rock. So I walked in and I was a bit mean because I asked the group what they thought of it. Now, what's happened is I've jumped up the sort of into the opinions, values and beliefs place without disclosing my own opinion or values first. So I'm expecting them to trust me to tell me, and yet I haven't given them anything back. So the way to do this is then to say, right, I thought that slap was awful because. What I'm doing by giving that sort of information is starting to give you an indication of what I value and what my beliefs are. Now, people can totally disagree with me, but I'm up at that place of values, attitudes and beliefs with I've taken the risk. I'm saying, here's what I think. I'm putting that into the mix. What do you think back? So I'm building trust by being risky first. But actually, it's when we understand each other at this sort of level, then we can explore, do you know what? When you are really arrogant or take over this conversation or don't show respect for anybody else, it makes me feel really frustrated. Now you're up at the rapport end. So if we all just stay very unauthentic and our conversations are all very ritual, cliche, facts and information, not only do we don't get to explore things about each other, but also we don't know how they'll respond to things. And this is where it helps us with things like conflict. So in a working environment, if my passion is all about achievement and quality, and your passion is all, and your values are all about the people, I might be chasing you to get something done, and you might be viewing this thing as, yes, but I need to get everybody on board. The end goal, ironically, is the same, but the lens is different. And so the clash starts to happen when I'm pushing my values on other people. Effectively, I'm tipping their boat. So whilst I'm trying to build trust, I'm up at that values and beliefs, and I'm playing my words through my own lens. I'm not listening back, so I'm losing trust because the other person needs to view that from a different way. And it's interesting to think, especially doing so much over Zoom, and how much of the chat that we have with other individuals is what builds us up the rapport chain. So if you have started, a new job in lockdown, you haven't had those along the corridor type chats about what you think about whether Will Smith slapping Chris Rock was right or wrong and just, and those actually anecdotal conversations take us up that pyramid. So when you are able to truly understand your own set of values, let's say your 5 values, and you know that that's when you're at your authentic best self, people actually start to trust you more and respect you more. So all of your decision making, all of your communication starts to be from this real place of authenticity and trust. And actually everybody starts to be guided by their moral compasses. And so this is where relationships and in your life start to get improvement, when you know that that thing that person does irritates you is just about a singular value, and there'll be other stuff that you can connect on. It doesn't have to be that one thing, but it prevents us seeing that whole person in their sort of entirety as annoying or whole, or that whole, activity that you have to do maybe as part of your job that really frustrates you might just play into one part of your values. There are other things that you can do to make it more interesting. And this is how it works on an individual basis. Most of the people that you connect with generally, you will share a value with. Very, very few will you share all values with. But if you've got that common place, that's where all your conversations, communications, and motivations to start from. So even if you have a difference, maybe I'm a fast-paced achievement person, and maybe someone else is a gather everybody together, and it's about the human connection. But if we both share something in common around our reason for doing it, start there, and the other things then become the way in which you will both approach it, but the end result still being the same. Think about what values you share maybe with a partner, with your family, with your, people in your teams. There'll always be one. And if you can find that, it's a great form of connection, because what I love about values, it does not play into any diversity, ethnicity, none of that is featured. You can share values on any level. And that's why it's a really powerful tool. But also, when you think about organizations you work for, and again, I'd be fascinated to know how many of your organizations actually have a set of values. When you walk into an interview, when you walk into an environment, when you walk into a job, there is that sense you get that you like it here, mostly done on your subconscious values basis. So when a job or an environment or a leadership team or whatever aren't fitting with your values, that work will feel really hard. And you can work, as I tried for a few years, really hard to pretend that that's not there and to try and overfix it. But actually, if at that such deep level you don't match on any level, you'll always find one or two. But if you don't match, that's then that place where you say, this job isn't for me. But equally, it's a really powerful tool if you're interviewing. If you know that you need freedom to do your job and that you really love connection and that you have high integrity, bring that into the interviewing process. Because actually, when a corporate values and an individual values fit, that's when you will be able to do your work at your best. It's when they don't fit that you're trying to fit square pegs into round holes. Some of my clients who don't get the jobs they went for retrospectively go, you know what, with hindsight, I don't think I would have liked working there. So it's actually really important to be aware of this, because it becomes your tool for what you are good at doing and how to be at your best. So when you think about this, what you've got to do as an individual is really get to know your values. Once you understand what your fingerprint is, what your things that are important in your life are, then you can also reflect on what you have and haven't got. bad days, something's missing. What can I bring into this day to help me with my motivation, to help me with my, to up the mood. But you can only up your mood if you know what it is that's missing. Notice when you're holding on too tightly to one of those values, which is the one that is most likely going to overplay, that's going to be the one that will be your inner narrative, inner critic. And then when you're in conflict with someone, something, because of a clash of values, the tool is to step away from the emotion of it and think about the actual task and the facts. Because if you focus on the task and the facts, then you can approach it in whichever behavior you like. So thinking back to our metaphor, you know, when you're thinking about your route down the river, you can do it in your own way, but you have to be on that river in the same place with the others to work out how you're going to do it. And it's okay to step away from your feelings, concentrate on the facts. It removes the emotion, it removes the conflict out of the conversation. And that's the cycle you get to know. Then it makes you understand your values even more, helps you understand what's missing or what you've got a lot of, and notice when you're holding on too tightly. Now that was a real whistle-stop tour. This is my favourite quote. Look, like your fingerprints, they're on everything you do. This isn't about changing behaviour. This isn't about doing anything differently. This is about just labelling what you're already doing so that you can understand it more, to understand yourself more. And to that note, I'd quite like to open up to questions now. I've got more to share, but what I would love to know is hear what's going on for you. Any questions, any observations? I'm going to stop sharing just for a sec. So, what are your current thoughts? What are your questions? Or put your, yeah, or as you said, put your hand up. Great question, Emily. Why is it difficult to identify your own values? So instantly, I would suggest that you have some sort of respect or humility value, that to think about yourself and put yourself first is challenging. You need to spend a little bit of time reflecting on some of these stories and how they've unfolded, your highs and lows, to understand what the patterns and themes are. If you really don't want to do it for yourself, which obviously I would encourage you to do, the other way of doing it is to ask for 3 words from friends and colleagues when they see you at their best. How would they describe you? You'll also notice a theme of values in those. So if you ask 5 people, you know, can you give me 3 words that would describe me when I'm at my best? See what they come back with. That's where you'll also see what your values are. But I encourage you, only you know really what your values are, because only you know what the flip side of it is. So only you know what annoys you, and only what you know what challenges you. So there you go. Hold on, that with Nicola. Yeah, absolutely. So Nicola said, so what is your organisation hasn't actually set out its values, but they're there. So just because they haven't labelled their values, every organisation acts by some sort of code of conduct. So if I, again, use COVID as an example, on the day that lockdown happened, your organisation will have responded in a certain way. That will have been based on their values and what felt like the right thing to do. So there will have been those organisations that didn't help anybody at all, and there'll be the organisations that did. So you're absolutely right. Some of the work I do with organisations is simply trying to label what it is what's our culture, how do we do things around here. Once you understand how you do things around here, you can label it. And because an organisation is made up of individuals, guess what? You'll all overlap with an area of it because you work there and you like working there. So it's quite easy to do it at an organisational level. The wordsmithing is what becomes the challenge, because, well, I think it's integrity, well, I think it's honesty. Again, I still go to pictures and words, describe it in a sentence, or capture the stories of the organisation. We're at our best when we did this. So that's successful moments for an organisation, display the organisational values. Let's have a look. Yep, Lisa, great. It is, so a lot of people want to know what their values are and don't ever look at what annoys them. So again, I had someone in a workshop fairly recently, a couple of weeks ago, where someone else came up with the word that fun and humour is very important to them. And someone else went, oh, I like that, I'll have that. It doesn't work like that. You can't just pick a value. So he said, but I want to be more fun and humorous. So I said, okay, Imagine an office environment where everything was jovial and fun and there were football tables and all this sort of stuff. How would you feel? He said, I would hate it. Right. That's not your value. So it is that test it. If I didn't have this, how would it feel? Or if someone flipped it against me, how would I feel? If it bothers you, categorically, it's a value. So that's another way to look at it. So brilliant question. What's the risks of not knowing what your values are? I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't know what my values were probably till about 15 years ago. But for me, it was just an unlocking of why I felt the way I felt. So you can absolutely go through life not knowing what they are and just sort of saying yes to the things that give you energy and saying no to the things that don't. But once you understand it, you can use it as part of your communication. So once I know that for me, creativity is important, if someone said to me, here's a project that you have to do, but you have to do it this way, and it's got to be done like this, and the output has to be like this, instantly I know that that's not for me. I don't want to be told what to do and conform and give structure. I want to think about it my own way and generate it. So again, some of you might be sitting there thinking, my boss isn't giving me the freedom to do what I want to do. Well, that's because if you've got that sort of, well, I'll use it, freedom type value, what understanding that enables you to go, could you just leave this with me for a little while for me to come up with it on myself, and then I'll check in with you. And suddenly I've got a way of exploring why this thing that they're doing is annoying me. It's the same with partnerships. My wonderful husband is very risk averse, but actually I've learned that keeps me safe. So I can see it in a different way using my values, using my growth values. I see it in a different way, so the communication becomes better. Let's have just a quick. Lovely Jackie King. Jackie, how are you? Social media is brilliant and awful at the same time. If I just go back to that, which river you were going to choose and which path down the river you're going to choose. What we are very good at is looking at whichever river everybody else is on. And then the word that creeps into your head is, oh, I should be on a different river. I should have chosen a different path. I should be in a faster boat. I should. Anytime any of you hear the word should, don't. Should is leaning into their boat. Should is unbalancing your boat. Should is leaving your own values behind. So actually, if I should go for that promotion, or I should have spoken up, if you don't have a value that supports that thing that you're going to try and do won't feel right. So that whole idea that social media is displaying to you everybody else's perspectives on the world, it's their values of what's important. It's their perspective of what's important. So if you start thinking that's what I should do, you're trying to play to someone else's values. So staying in your own values is really sure to say, absolutely that's for them, but this is my choice, this is my map, this is my route. And that is also important in communication. Some people absolutely start their jobs, want to get to the top without stopping. Other people start their jobs, love what they do in the detail, don't ever want to be a manager, don't ever want to lead a team. And that's all right too. And if I know that my preference is, and my values are about doing the actual doing, as opposed to leading and influencing and being, an inspirational leader, the more I try to be an inspirational leader, the more I'll hate it. The more doing what I do is right for me. It's because I'm living my values. Then you'll be at your best. Let me have a quick read.
I was going to jump in, Chloe, and just say your reading, but also that great question from Emily in terms of how do you deal with situations at work that can conflict with your values. And we had a bit of a pre-conversation about this, about working with like Lewis Hamilton out driving in Qatar. But how do you deal where you've got brands or you've got companies, or where your income depends on working with someone whose brands might whose values might completely conflict with yours? I think it's really interesting space within sport generally, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this works exactly at an individual and at a corporate level. So I was using this example the other day. I think it's called Tony's chocolate bars, which are those really brightly coloured chocolate. And inside their wrappers, they've got the most wonderful statement about how they support fair trade and all of this sort of stuff. And I think it was about a month ago they came out against Cadbury's, a real sort of social media profile. You're awful, you're not supporting fair trade. And of course, you think, yeah, great, you're living your values, you're on purpose. Then it turns out they've sold out to Nestle. And you go, like, hold on. Okay. So everything, as Jackie said as well, look, everything is now quite public. So for those of you who are lucky enough to have a choice, it works at that level. If I know what river I've chosen and I know what route I'm taking, some of that clarity gives us the permission to say no to other things. So if I know that this is really important to me, I have a choice of whether to say yes or no to this. I can say yes or no to the right things. However, some of the things you have to accept. It's life. We have to pay mortgages. Other things take over. So really, just understanding your values as an organization or as an individual helps you work out what your boundaries are. So I might, for this period in time, lower one of my expectations about one of my really important boundaries. Your challenge there is to quieten the inner critic. Once you've made that decision, do you know what? So as an example, I do a lot in sport. I get paid very well by insurance. Insurance is horrific. They're horrible to women. It's all an awful system, but it serves a purpose for me to also work with sport. That's where my balance comes in. So I think where you've got a choice, which I know not everybody has, that articulation and clarity of I'm doing this for this purpose and it might grate against this value for the short term or for this reason, gives you the reason to accept it. But just taking Emily's question, when you've got a situation at work, it's becoming more common to use values in your conversation. So going back to that relationship pyramid, one of the things you've got to try and work out is what is their angle that they're coming from, what is their driving force and what's important to them. So again, I'm going to be very sort of male bashing, and I don't mean to be, but if you've got a male boss, as an example, who is absolutely driven on achievement, status, we need to get this completed, we need to do it this way, we need to do it quickly, and we're going to tread on everybody on the way up, that will grate against you. So the conversation needs to be this idea that take it to the task. What's that end goal? The task is to deliver, let's say, a project. What you can then say is, your approach might be like this. My approach, the way I do it at my best, or if you want to get the best out of me, is for me to do it like this. And acknowledge that there is a difference. I don't feel comfortable doing it the way you do. Here's how I do it. So what you're really doing is seeking permission to get to the same result, but the way that you want to do it. It goes back to that behaviors. I'm going to do it this way because this is what's important to me. When it gets to that real moral choice, then it becomes much harder. If there is an actual, I want A and they want B, and the values sit in the middle, someone has to rescind their values. So either find one of your other values that you can sort of almost make peace with, but if not, this is where the challenges come in. This is where you have to question whether where you are right is right for you to be at your best. Right. I hope these are answering the questions. Yes, should, that's the word. There's a great share by, oh, lovely Sarah, how are you? What we should do versus what we must do. Some of our shoulds, some of our values, we have to sort of put in a box because of the industry or the sector or just the organization I work in. There's something about still voicing it, because actually if you hide it, that is effectively feeding your lack of motivation. That's what then becomes missing. So we'll either find it from another place, a different part of your life, but also what is it that you're compromising, and also how long are you going to compromise for? That's some of the challenge we've got. This, ages ago now, so we did the energy one. All of anything that when your boat is unbalanced, you are using more energy to balance it. So yes, you can do it short term. Yes, you can sort of hide some of your values away for a short period of time. But if you don't have them, you will start to suffer. It will start to become a demotivational. You'll start to tip into survival mode, and then you may even end up in burnout zone because you are over exercising yourself to try and keep your boat balanced. Any other thoughts, questions?
I've got a question that someone sent to me that they'd like me to ask you. So the impact of mental health and neurodivergence has on the ability to maintain and live by values. This person knows what the values are, but the ability to follow up and demonstrate them is often a challenge due to the impact of mental health and neurodivergence. Should values be adjusted to meet that? No,
great question. And yes, very prevalent. I think where the neurodiversity comes into it is you can't change your values. I think that's the unbalancing of your boat. So if I need to be a bit more, I don't know, dishonest because of my role, the overwork and it won't sit right with you, because it won't sit right with you. You're trying to work too hard to do it. So when you think about, and actually whether it's neurodiversity or not, if you're in the wrong place, meaning the environment around you isn't supportive of who you are at your best, it's so easy for me to sit here and say this, but actually find the environment where you are valued. So the one thing I will say about organisations as well, they are getting much better at appreciating everybody does things in slightly different ways, in slightly different means. And so actually it's about finding an environment that accepts that and welcomes that, as opposed to don't ever try and change yourself to fit in, because that's the exhausting bit. So I think it's very much, this goes back to that cultural fit, you know, in interviewing and finding jobs. If I understand who I am and what I need, I can seek that. You know, interviews should be 50-50. They should be explaining why it's important that you work here and how we can help you, as much as you trying to sell yourself to them. It's got to work both ways. So yes, that's a really important point.
Is our value something, I feel like, as an older woman, I feel like across time they've evolved, but is it something you should be looking at and considering on a regular basis, like looking back and considering, or do you find what your values are and they stay with you indefinitely almost?
A bit of both. So I first found out about my values probably 15 years ago, and of course I was in the finance world, but my definition of success then was very different to what it is now. So the things that drive me and what's important to me will stay the same, but what you'll find is something like lockdown hits and they'll flip. Same values, suddenly something is far more important than it ever used to be. So they're still there, they're still in you, but they do have a different prioritization. The other thing that does tend to change them, or at least add to them, is big moments of sort of where your resilience is tested. And because anything that makes you question yourself, lockdown, death, illness, that's at those points where you readjust and you sort of go, hold on, is this thing still the thing that drives me importance? Most of the time, yes, it is. But some of the time, you might add something, or something just morphs a little bit because of that exposure to whatever's just happened. But I would look at them monthly. And honestly, for my clients, I'd say, keep going with that whole, use it as the barometer. Have I had a really awesome day? What was it? Am I not having a good time at the moment? What is it? Keep checking in with them, because that just helps you concrete them. Got a couple of minutes left.
Any other questions at all for Chloe? Put your hand up if you want to ask a question. And that's been really useful for me. It's just that whole re-clarifying and almost giving yourself permission to do it too, isn't it? I think it's something that happens subconsciously, but we don't actually sit and think about it in a more open fashion.
I know there's a few people on this call that I've worked with. I think everybody without exception will say that self-reflection gives you, that little bit of time gives you so much more clarity as a result of doing this. It's always sort of one of those on our to-do list somewhere where I must think about, make time for reflecting on what's been good, bad, just generally, just helps you get into a more pattern. And we don't have time to do it. You know, the second we stop work, we go on to do the other 3,000 things on our to-do list. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and thank you to everybody. Lots of really positive things, people going off to ask their colleagues to share the 3 things
yeah
that help shape their values. So thank you to everybody.